Any new business or review?
We have a presenter right behind you, Ms. Tate.
Great. I figured you were a presenter. We have to review and approve the minutes first. I think that's, or do we go to the presenter first? I'm happy to go to the presenter first. Let you guys get out of here.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Use one of the mics.
Oh, we don't have to. She's not here yet.
Okay, cool. Okay, do you mind pulling up my slides?
Oh, yeah.
No, you're fine. So before we get started, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Tate Paul. I'm the Deputy Director of Elections here for Arlington County. My office is right down the hallway. And I'm going to talk to you all about ranked choice voting. This is a new form of voting we have here in Arlington. We're the first jurisdiction in the Commonwealth to use ranked choice voting. So we're doing it live. We're really excited about it. I'm going to run through a few slides. I also have our voting equipment here. If anyone would like to see what the experience is like on the ballot marker, if you use the ballot marker to vote, we've been toying around with it. I think it's actually easier to vote on the ballot marker when it comes to ranked choice voting because you can't overvote, so we can talk about that. And then I have these fake ballots. These are not the offices that are actually, it doesn't represent this. We made this months ago. These are fake names that we made up. But I want you guys to see kind of what the ballot is going to feel like because we have gotten a lot of questions about the layout. So again, this doesn't represent the offices that you'll see actually on election day, but it kind of gives y'all a vibe of what it'll feel like in general.
Is it being used like for the new voter education initiative?
This ballot?
Yeah.
Yes, well, we have, the reason I have these is because we haven't gotten the actual sample ballot approved by the state yet. So we've been using these to test our equipment. We're hoping, we just heard back from the state, they never approve it from first go because it's the state. So we got a little tiny piece of feedback and we're gonna tweak that. And then hopefully we'll get started from there. So as we're getting the slides pulled up, the main thing I wanted to show y'all is that the ranked choice voting portion is only for county board. So every other office that we have on the ballot is traditional voting. You choose one. So that'll be on the front of your ballot when you vote. And then on the back of the ballot, we'll have separate instructions, and then that's the ranked choice voting portion. So you have 6 candidates for county board, and you're able to rank 3. So first, second, and third choice. We'll talk a little bit more about what that'll look like. So, thank you. All right. Would it be easier if I click next, or what would you?
I can do it.
Okay. So if you want to head over to the next one. So what we're going to talk about is I'll introduce myself a little bit, and as well as our outreach team, to talk about what is ranked choice voting, the ballot itself, why we're doing ranked choice voting, which is the question everyone asks. What are the benefits? We'll dive into tabulation a little bit, and then we'll talk about results, and I want to leave most of my time for questions. So we'll head over to introduction. So like I said, my name is Tate. I'm the Deputy Director of Elections for Arlington County. I've been with the county for about a year now. A little bit about myself and why I'm excited to be here. My background is in disability advocacy. So I went to Auburn University in Alabama, and I did my master's in public administration, and I actually studied election administration at Auburn. Auburn's one of the 2 schools that has an election program. And all my research was done in ADA accommodations for polling sites. So I started off working for the P&A in Alabama as the voting rights advocate. So I spent my time making poll sites accessible and working with voters with disabilities. So that's my background. So I'm really excited to be here. I was with NFB, Potomac chapter last week. So I'm really in my element now before I have to go out all other voters that ask me boring questions. So I'm really excited to be here with them tonight. And I like to think of myself obviously as an advocate. So I'm always here. If you guys have questions or concerns about your polling site, about something that you're seeing, please come to me and I will be sure to remedy it right away because my workers know that I don't stand for that. The rest of our outreach team is made up of Gretchen Reinemeyer, who is the Director of Elections, the big boss lady, and then Tanya Griffin is our communications and outreach person. I want to encourage y'all, we do have a lot of advocates in the ranked choice voting space in Arlington County, and while they present a great wealth of information about the basics of ranked choice voting, they don't necessarily understand the mechanics of ranked choice voting in Arlington County. And so we've had a few issues of a little bit of misinformation being spread in the community. So I would encourage y'all to really make sure that if you see information that is coming from our office. It'll always have our logo on it, all of our flyers do. If you have any questions, if you hear something and you're like, that doesn't sound right, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to clarify that. So next slide. That's me and other people. Next slide. So what is ranked choice voting? So ranked choice voting is a voting method where voters get to rank their first, second, and third choice candidate. So in other jurisdictions, they may rank more, but in Arlington, due to our system limitations, you'll just rank your first, second, and third. So you'll give out a gold, silver, and bronze medal, essentially, is what you'll be doing. Next slide. So this allows your vote to count towards another candidate if your first choice is eliminated. So for example, if your first choice candidate is eliminated due to having the least amount of votes in that round, then it moves over to your second choice, and then your vote gets transferred over to your second choice candidate. And then if your second choice candidate is also eliminated in a subsequent round, then your vote gets transferred over to your third choice candidate. So before, if the person you voted for didn't have enough votes, then your vote didn't end up counting. This gives your vote a chance to count to a candidate that stands in further rounds. Next slide. So RCV in Arlington, what is this going to look like here in Arlington? Ranked choice voting is used across the country in many different elections, but in Arlington specific, this is the first time a multi-winner race has been done in a primary in the country. So it's a brand new concept, even the experts. So as y'all see in front of you, we have a one-sheet ballot. That's kind of part of the misconception we've heard already, is that it's going to be two separate ballots. It will be one ballot, just like what you see in front of you. It'll be double-sided, and as I mentioned earlier, only the county board race is using ranked choice voting. All the other races will be traditional voting, and that your votes will go into a scanner, which I have in the back of the room on the left side. That's what our scanners look like. Normally they're sitting on top of what looks like a big black trash can. And you'll go into that, and then it goes collects into that bin, and that is how your vote is counted. So this is what it'll look like. So ideally we have 6 candidates, so it's a little bit longer than this, and you'll rank your first, second, and third choice candidate. Pretty simple. Next slide. You can rank up to 3 candidates, and the top 2 candidates win. So this is a 2 open seat county board race. So the top 2 candidates with the most votes will win. So here's an example of what not to do. So you don't want to rank all 3 places for one candidate. This does not vote for that person 3 times. Essentially, all this does is that if candidate A was eliminated, your ballot becomes what we say is inactive, where your votes don't get transferred to another candidate, and your vote is no longer counted since that candidate. Here's another example of what not to do. You don't rank down. You don't give everyone a first choice or 3 people first choice. If you were to vote your ballot like this, the scanner will reject it. It's what's called an overvote. You'll get a chance to correct your ballot. If this is how you intended to mark your ballot, you're welcome to put it back into the scanner, but this entire race would not be counted because we can't determine who has the intent of having the actual first choice count. Okay, so we'll do a little review. All right, so what do you think happens in this scenario where you don't rank someone in first, but you rank second and third? This may be a trick because I don't think I have this yet, actually.
The second person would get the vote.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. So our second gets moved up and our third gets moved up. So if these 2 candidates A and B, are both eliminated, then your ballot would become inactive after that. But candidate A would be ran as a first choice, and candidate 3 as a second, or candidate B as a second choice if candidate A was eliminated. Yeah. All right, next one. What do we think happens with this one?
Only candidate A would be counted.
Candidate B.
Or candidate, my bad.
Yep.
Only candidate B would be counted. If they get eliminated, then they don't.
Your ballot's inactive. That's right. Perfect. Next one. All right. What do we think happens with this one? I think very simple. It's eliminated, right? So it will get rejected. So if you vote this way on election day, it'll get spit back out, and a little receipt gets printed on the scanner. The election officer will help explain, look at your ballot, figure out why it was rejected, and then you'll get a chance to fix it. You always have a chance to fix any mistake on your ballot, but like I said, if that is how you intended to vote, we always want our voters to vote however they want. So even if you understand that this isn't going to count, if that was your intent, you still get to cast your ballot that way.
So if I understand you correctly, it's It's in real time. It'll go through the scanner and it will reject you right away.
Yep.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Now, are the poll workers allowed to say the reason why it got rejected?
Yes, they have to say that.
Okay.
So poll workers are there to help you. They're there to help any voter. They can fill out what's called a request for assistance form. So if a poll worker sees the way that you mark your ballot, other than just assisting you at the scanner, if they see you marking your ballot, or if they're assisting you in the booth marking your ballot, then you both have to sign what's called a request for assistance form. This is acknowledging that you as the voter are giving them permission to assist you, and that they, as the assistant, are marking the ballot as you intended and not a different way. So it's that accountability, that legal accountability that we have, and there's a legal statement in there that says under the perjury law. So.
Now, for this race, is this being an advertised option, considering this is the first time it's being used in the Commonwealth?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of outreach for this. Our outreach launched last week with the open house. It was in conjunction with the open house. And so that was kind of our kickoff. We've been waiting for a lot of guidance from the state, and so we didn't have guidance from the state until then. And so now that we have that, we're doing a bunch of events. We're doing an event with our partners at the League. Joan's on the call. Tomorrow night it's in the library at 6:30. And then we have lots of events with all the different civ feds. I think we're going to pretty much every civ fed meeting, it feels like, coming up. So we're doing a lot in the community outreach wise. This is a Democratic primary, so only the Democratic Party is using this as their nomination method. So a lot of that would fall on the Democratic Party since we're a nonpartisan county organization. So a lot of the education does fall to them to educate their voters, but we do everything we can within the confines of the law by being nonpartisan.
Are they allowed to request a copy of this?
So we'll have a sample ballot on our website as soon as the state approves it, and then all the candidates, of course, normally put out their own sample ballots of how they want you to mark your ballot. Ours is blank; it doesn't tell you who to vote for. That'd be illegal.
Also, when November elections come around, are we doing ranked choice voting on that?
That's a great question that I don't have the answer to. So the county board has only approved ranked choice voting for the June primary, or they can only add it for county board races. So the state code says that city councils and county boards can only approve this as a method of voting for those races. So they're going to meet in June to decide if they want to continue this in November. Maybe they only want to use it for primaries. Maybe they want to use it forever. We don't know. It's up to them to decide, and we will do what they tell us to do, as we do for everything else. So. All right. So this one I think we already talked about. It would be rejected because we have that overvote. All right. So why is ranked choice voting happening? So that's kind of what I just talked about. It's been surprising that this, I feel like, has really been the main question we've been getting is, why are we doing this, right? Why are we changing? And like I said, in 2020, a law was passed by the General Assembly that allowed city and county boards to use this as their method of voting for those races. And our county board here voted in December to approve this for the county board race for June, and we'll see if they approve it. So a few benefits. This is kind of the national benefit of ranked choice voting, and what's been promoted is that it allows, ranking multiple candidate allows voters to still have a voice and a choice if their first choice candidate does get eliminated.
Sorry, we have a caller. Doris, you had a question? She just emailed.
You're muted, Doris.
Can you hear
Can you
me?
hear? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was having problems muting and unmuting. I'm not sure. Just to tell you, I'm a blind person, so I'm just curious about. Can you describe the procedure using the audible ballot?
Yes,
rank voting.
Yes, I will get to that. Do you use the ballot marker, or do you use an email ballot?
Excuse me?
Do you use the ballot marker to vote in person, or do you get a ballot via email?
I use the audible ballot.
Okay. As soon as I finish this slide, I'll talk about that, if that's okay with you.
but I'm asking for many people, so.
Right, yes, understood. I'll just finish these quick points and then we'll cover that. So, also, another benefit of ranked choice voting is that candidates have to appeal to people who might initially vote for someone else. So something that you'll hear a lot in candidates that are running in a ranked choice voting contest is, I know I'm not going to be your first choice, but I'd love to be your second choice, or I'd love to be your third choice, right? So, and because of this, it causes candidates to have a more friendly campaign, right? So you're not going to give a second or a third choice vote to someone who's been bad-mouthing your first choice candidate, right? That's illogical. So this incentivizes candidates to kind of have more civil campaigns. And at the end of the day, it ensures that candidates with the broadest support actually wins the election. So the last time we had 2 totally open seats with no incumbents for the county board, both candidates only won about 20% of the vote. Since we're a plurality state here in Virginia, that allowed them to secure those seats because those were the 2 seats with the most votes. Ranked choice voting ensures that those 2 candidates will receive at least 33.33% of the vote, or they're the last 2 candidates standing. So in theory, they will receive more votes than how they have previously. So it ensures that the candidates with more support wins. Maybe not the most first choice votes, but they at least have second and third choice votes. So for our ballot marker machine, as I was talking with the NFB Potomac chapter last week, and I said earlier, I think that it's a lot easier to use the ballot marker machine when it comes to ranked choice voting. So you'll rank the other races in your jurisdiction as normal, so that part of the audio ballot hasn't changed. And then when you get to the ranked choice voting portion, it'll present itself in 3 screens. So the first question will be asking for your first ranking. So it'll say rank 1 out of 3. And it'll list the names just like normal, on a normal ballot would, and you would select your person of who you want to mark for your first choice candidate. Then when you go to the next screen, it'll ask for your second choice candidate. What's great is that it has your first choice candidate grayed out, and you can't select them. So it won't allow you to make that overvote that I think a lot of people marking a paper ballot will make that mistake. And so you aren't able to choose that. So you'll choose your second choice candidate, and then when you go to the next screen, it'll give you third choice candidate. And so that is how you'll do it, and then you'll submit your ballot like normal after that. When you do select it in those ranking, the screen of first choice, the screen of second choice, and third choice, when you make your selection, it will say that all candidates that you've reached your maximum amount of candidates, and that's because you can only vote for one person in each ranking. So once you go to the next screen, it'll allow you to choose your next choice of your candidate in the next ranking, and so you'll follow through the ballot.
The ranked choices are only going to be counted by your office or whoever volunteers or whatever, right?
Right. So that's the next slide. So how is RCV tabulated?
So if you've got 3 or 4 or whatever, if what I don't understand about this is if there are 4 or 5 people how many people is it for a race? I mean, is it only one race?
There's 6 people on the ballot, and you rank 3. So you rank your first, second, and third choices out of those 6 total.
But sometimes when you're making a choice like this, you may want number 1, and then number 3 might be your second choice. But if number 3 gets kicked out, then maybe my choice is between 2 and 4. And I don't know how voting this way takes into account the possibilities.
Right. So this brings up a good point that I think is another misconception in the Arlington County as a community, is that all of this voting happens at one time. So it's not like we run the first round and then someone's eliminated and you get to come back and vote again. So on election day, whenever you vote, whether it's during the 45 days of early voting or on election day, you'll rank your first, second, and third choices, and then it goes into tabulation software, and we run those rounds of elimination on our end, on our secure computer software. So it's no different for you on election day, other than the fact that if we weren't doing ranked choice voting, you would just pick two. You would just vote for two candidates out of the six, and now you're ranking first, second, and third choices.
So this is in lieu of runoffs.
Right. That's another name for ranked choice voting is instant runoff voting. This eliminates the need of a runoff, which we don't have runoffs in Virginia.
Is this only going to be the case in the primary?
So we don't know the answer to that question yet. The county board has only approved this for the primary, and they'll be meeting in June to decide if they want to use it for the general election.
Okay.
All right. So, ranked choice voting.
Wait a minute, is Arlington the only jurisdiction doing this?
Yes, Arlington is the only jurisdiction in the Commonwealth doing this. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, and I know I don't want to interrupt the speed
No,
of your thing. So absentee ballots, if you've made a mistake, what happens on election night? Because handicapped people like me, I don't go to the, so if you make it, like, how is that going to be?
This is a great
After
question. So,
Because
absentee ballots.
there's not a person that helps me.
Right. So as a county, we use an exorbitant amount of absentee ballots for our population because of our uniformed and overseas voters. So we do a process. We cannot tabulate absentee ballots until election night, but we do what's called pre-processing of them. So if we receive a ballot that has an error, as soon as we get your ballot, we open it, we make sure that it's your ballot and that it was you that signed it. And then we do what's called pre-processing of the ballot. So we look for those errors, and if there are errors, then it allows us the opportunity for you to cure your ballot. So we contact you and let you know there was an error with your ballot. You can either choose to have your ballot reissued, and we mail your ballot to you again, and you can fill it out again, and then when we get your new ballot, your old ballot is no longer counted, or you can always choose to come and vote in person. If it's too close to the deadline, you can come and vote early up until the Saturday before the election or vote on election day. So we do that process, it's called curing. It's the same thing as if you were missing a witness signature or your information was incorrect. It's called the cure process is the term we use.
So are you going to make that known to the people that the faster they turn in their absentee ballot, the more likely it will be counted because remailing something over, like, that whole process?
Right.
That's
So
gonna be known.
if you're an overseas voter, if you get an email ballot, it's a little bit different because it's obviously quicker to get an email than it is to get a letter. But it is in the instructions. We also have our drop boxes here. So I personally, I obviously can't vote on election day because I'm working. So I get my absentee ballot and I put it in a drop box because the drop boxes are collected every 24 hours. So we have a lot quicker return rate if you use a drop box. And so we try to make sure that that's known to all of our absentee voters that are here locally.
I have a question regarding drop boxes. Before we do that, I'm going to consult with Courtney first.
Okay.
Courtney, considering I'm on the steering committee for the Democratic Party, is this a conflict of interest for me? If so, I'll remove myself from the conversation.
I don't think
Okay, I just wanted to,
it is.
since this is a public meeting and, my position that, in my personal capacity in the advisory committee, we've heard some, I don't want to call them rumors, but talks that the electoral board is considering reducing the amount of ballot boxes. Is that a public fact?
This is a great question.
Mhm.
So let me paint a brief picture. So the electoral board in the Commonwealth, they are not elected like our county board and our city council are, right? So they are nominated members. There's 3 members of every electoral board for every jurisdiction. 2 of those members have to reflect the party of the sitting governor. So since we just changed parties of the sitting governor, that means we've gained a new electoral board member. So our electoral board is made up of 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. So as a shift and that happens, it is likely as we see that their priorities do change. There was information presented to us at an electoral board requesting that we reduce the number of drop boxes here in Arlington County. Arlington County has 9 drop boxes. Every other jurisdiction in Virginia only has 1. Even Fairfax County, where I live, only has 1 drop box. Now we have 18 satellite voting sites for early voting, and those are drop box locations, but only when the satellite site is open. So we're the only jurisdiction that has more than one 24/7 drop box. Under Virginia code, they are under 24/7 video surveillance, and like I said, they are collected every 24 hours by 2 members from our office, and actual employees of our office, not volunteers. So that's kind of the picture. We were asked to reduce this number. At the end of the day, Virginia code says that the number of drop boxes is to be determined by the general registrar, not the electoral board.
Oh.
So it is my
that's good to
boss's decision. She decided that since this is a Democratic primary and only the Democratic Party is participating in this primary, that she left it up to the Democratic Party to decide for June if they wanted to use all 9 drop boxes for all 45 days, if they wanted to reduce the number of days, reduce the number of drop boxes. And they decided to use all 9 for all 45 days under state code as allowed. So that's the plan for June. We don't have a plan in place for November. It just depends, I think, on the parties' opinions, and if we get a formal opinion from both parties, and that'll be taken into account, but the decision is ultimately the general registrar's.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised on that first news. I'll follow up with Steve on that.
On what is it, I mean, to me, that's purely partisan. On what grounds are they asking Arlington to reduce the number? It's like, we don't want as many people to vote. We want to make it harder. That's the American way. Is that the grounds they're using?
This is also a great question. As a reminder, our office is nonpartisan, but like you said, we do have partisan people that come to our meetings, just like this, as a public meeting. They're allowed to present. The presentation that was given to us with the request of the dropping of the drop boxes, was that it was too many dollars being spent on having to collect every 24 hours. So we do have to pay people. Obviously, they get paid an hourly wage to drive around Arlington. And although we are small, it still takes about 2 hours to collect out of all 9 drop boxes. So that was the premise that was given to us. And that is the premise that we decided against once we did our own calculations.
Well, at least they tried at a premise.
Yeah.
Got handed to them.
But that's 2 employees for all 9 boxes, and they can get that done in 2
They go on a
hours.
route, yes. So they take a county vehicle, that way it's all official. We don't want people rolling up in their own car,
Yeah.
wearing their little safety vests that they
Yeah.
wear, looking really cute. And they go together and they collect them about every 24 hours. So we also have to pay them for the weekend, but they don't get paid extra unless they incur.
Okay, well, that's a separate comment we'll have when the general, but, yeah.
Yes, so I'll stop there with our tabulation. It's a lot. I know Joan has her hand raised. Joan, did you want to address something?
I just, speaking for the League of Women Voters, I just wanted to say that we were at that electoral board meeting and we were at the next electoral board meeting when I presented a rather detailed 3-page presentation on why the drop boxes are valuable and necessary. And if anyone, and again, we are nonpartisan, but we believe that everybody should vote and make it as easy as possible, regardless. If anybody is interested in receiving that, let me know. Our email is lwvarlingtonva@gmail.com. I'd be happy to send that to you.
Wasn't very well done. Maybe say something. Yes.
Yes, this will be a strange question.
Okay. I've been asked stranger.
I just want to start with the premise that I vote in every election. So the reason I'm asking the question, however, is because I've been doing curbside voting. And I purposely do it because I don't want them to get rid of curbside voting. I understand that you can get rid of curbside voting, so yay for the county for doing it. That's one thing. The second thing is, when I used to go in, they had the touch screen. And this is why I don't want you to think I'm totally out of it. Do they not have the touch screens anymore, except for people who requested for accommodation purposes?
Great question. So I have a ballot marker set up in the back. Every precinct and early voting site does have it, and anyone can use it. That's when I did get to vote in person back in the day. That was how I voted, because again, I think it allows less error, and I think it's easier. I encourage my election officers to vote that way on the ballot marker in the morning to make sure that it's working for the workers that need to cast their ballot. I can't force them to do that, so it's still they have to decide to do that, but it is set up in every precinct and at all early voting sites for all 45 days that we're open here.
I have a question. So was listening on the last capital improvement plan, and Director Raymeyer mentioned y'all are selecting new voter machines.
Yes, so in 2025 is when we are budgeted to get new voting equipment. Our equipment was purchased in 2015, so it is a little old. And then the purchase of that new equipment would allow us, if we continue with ranked choice voting, to rank more than 3. But because of the system limitations we have, that's why we can only rank 3.
And it'll still be paper, right? Or is that going to be like?
Yeah,
a
so we will
community
always
process?
have paper-based voting here in Virginia, but there will always be an accessible voting machine. So a ballot marking machine. In Virginia, we are able to purchase equipment at the county level, whereas like our neighbors in DC and Maryland, it's a statewide contract, and they all use the same equipment. It's not like that here in Virginia. So we use different equipment than our neighbors in Alexandria, our neighbors in the city of Falls Church. We use the same setup as city of Fairfax, half the setup of Loudoun County. So we're really unique in that. So we have a lot of options of what kind of equipment we can purchase, but we will always have a paper-based ballot that will go through a scanner, and then a ballot marking machine that prints off your choices that you then feed through the scanner as well. So all the ballots get collected in one place.
So with that contracting process, will there be an opportunity for the public to interact with options?
So that's my hope. So one of the things I did when I worked in Alabama with the P&A was put together a disability group to work with the state on purchasing new voting equipment. So if I'm here in 2025, which I hope I am, unless I get fired for some reason, then that is my goal. So we don't know how next year will go, but we'll see in 2025. That is my goal, to have a user group. Like I could come invite y'all when the vendors come to do presentations on their equipment. You can test it out and see what works, what doesn't. Ask them really hard and scary questions. That way I don't have to. And so that is how I envision the purchasing process going for us.
Well, I do want to say, if Director Raymeyer is listening to this recording, that personally I am very grateful that we have someone experienced in disability accessibility policies and procedures. That is something that the county has been has a deficit on, and in this area in particular, I'm excited to have you on board with us, and welcome to Arlington.
That's very nice.
Yeah, and that leads me to my second question. As you may have noticed, Arlington is going through a construction phase of many phases. And we have, I've heard issues, particularly in the Crystal City and Pentagon City area, that contractors make decisions sometimes on election day to close off sidewalks. How, in your position, how are you thinking about addressing those issues and, ensuring that accessibility at all 54 precincts are, accessible?
This is a great question. So this is obviously what I care the most about when it comes to my job. And so it's something that I really worked with. Part of my job is I train all the poll workers. So I recruit, I schedule, and I train all of them. So one of the things that I implemented last year was that we know all of our sites are physically accessible in terms of the DOJ checklist. But when you go into a gym, like at Walter Reed, and the gym's empty, you say, yeah, it's accessible, but the room's not set up for voting, right? So one thing I worked with my poll workers was an election day checklist, and this has become a big part of it. So in November, we had an issue with Met Park, where the contractor that I shall not name decided to tear up the sidewalk the day before election day, and we didn't know. And so we didn't know until our poll workers got there at 5 a.m. on election day that this was an issue. And so we're working on a quicker way for us to communicate with our police department to secure whether we need to close down the street, which would also be a nightmare, but it's better. It's a better option than not having a sidewalk. And so figuring out a way that we can work with the facility, since we do use a mix of private and public spaces, to either get another entrance if the entrance is completely torn up or blocked off, as well as working with our police department. But we only have that short hour window before the poll sites open to do all of that work. And so it may not be perfect at 6 a.m., but we're working really hard to make sure that it's ready as soon as we can. Just getting all those players at 5 a.m. can be a little difficult, but when we don't know ahead of time, if we know ahead of time, of course, we do the best that we can with that team of workers.
Now, have you considered, and I'm unsure the area of the county that is the liaison with the constructions, either permitting or code enforcement, have we, considered a cross-office collaboration to say, hey, these are our voting sites, these are the specific pathways that we would like to be preserved between, for our special voting sites, well, those are in county office buildings, so we can control those directly.
Right.
But in our election day sites, saying, we use the name of the office and not the name of the company.
Yeah.
But, Met Park or the neighbor next to Met Park, hey, we understand you're doing this construction, but on November 4th, can you adjust your plans to work around this date?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we do that, and that's what's frustrating. So we work with Department of Environmental Services and the permitting office because they have to go and tape off all the meters
Mhm.
or all the parking spots that are reserved outside of facilities to show that they're only reserved for voting and you don't have to pay to park, right? Because that'd be a poll tax. We don't like that. And so they are there normally 48 hours before, so they can kind of give us a heads up. But we require written confirmation from all of our facilities saying that they're ready to serve as a precinct on election day, that they understand the legal implications of that. Because having to do an emergency move on election day is really, really difficult and inefficient. And so we have that written confirmation. And I think sometimes the construction workers, their priority is not election day, their priority is getting their work done. And they just, I don't want to say they don't care, but it's just not their priority. And so it's not in the forefront of their mind.
So if a construction company or facility violates that agreement, what are the repercussions that the county can enforce?
So it kind of depends. Obviously, the permitting office can revoke permits or implement some type of punishment on that permit for that within their fines that they're allowed to give. That's really rare because we work so closely with them that we have found that it's better to kind of do the Band-Aid fixes of bringing in the police department, finding alternate entrances, putting up 1 million signs, and doing that method versus going through the work of the construction company because it's so slow.
Yeah, so is not the construction company, but the owner of that site, the people who hired the construction company, are they notified of violations?
Yes, yeah, that we are on the phone with them
And
at their contact.
what's typically their response when that occurs?
Oh no, oh my God,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Typically, because one of the things, especially in the Crystal, Pentagon City area, is that being able to vote where you live is a luxury, right? It's part of this luxury apartments. You can vote here, like retirement homes. We vote in a lot of retirement homes. And so they don't want to affect that relationship with us because it's a selling point for them. Now, when Amazon does open, we do have side agreements with them to use all of their facilities as precincts for election day. So I think that'll alleviate at least that burden where we only have a few options, but until that happens, our hands are kind of tied.
Now, given that, I'll make this my last question, and we'll probably have more questions as we get to the general. But, next year is a big election. What support, can we write a letter or, maybe possible to facilitate a meeting with the bid in that area to, provide that humanistic story and less of that regulatory demand, because we want, if there is a pause, so we don't know if, 2024 will have that issue, but I feel like as an advisory commission, we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can as a commission, whether that's, writing to the county board to talk to the bids, or, I guess we'll follow up with the county board office on that. Overall, it's like, we want to make sure we're doing, exhausting every resource as a commission to talk to, the Crystal City, Pentagon City businesses.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that offer. I'll definitely keep you guys on the email list for when I need backup. That's always really helpful. We will have to add several precincts moving into next year. We already have to add a few for November because we're just growing so much in that area, which makes it hard. And so I will definitely keep you guys in the loop if I need a little bit of expertise, if I need, if I have questions. That way when I'm going into these meetings with side agreements with economic development and construction, we have, like you said, that piece of the story, which is so important.
Sorry, I said that was my last
I think we
question.
have questions down here. if you wanna-
Yeah.
Yeah, you could go first.
Quick question. I have been trying for years to get Thomas Jefferson Middle School, which is an election site, and I never thought about this route, to be accessible.
Okay,
Is there a way to make that site, because that's technically where I'm supposed to vote, and I've never been able to vote in person because it's not accessible.
so that is one of our problem sites. We have to use a separate door for the accessible entrance, and we're required to mark that because that main door, I'm still not totally familiar with all of them, but that's the one where the main entrance has those steps. Is that the one by Lover Run, or is that a different one?
That's a different one. No,
No.
TJ doesn't have accessible parking, so there's no ramp. Like, they have 2 handicap parking spaces, but there's no curb cut from those spaces. So you have to go through the whole entire parking lot, and that makes it
Got it. Okay.
impossible to go vote.
I will personally go out there and check it out, and my immediate thought is that we buy a temporary ramp that we roll out for election day to serve as a curb cut. Because I can't go out there and cut the curb, but I can always, we have a really great relationship with schools, because we use pretty much every school, and I can always work with that contact there and see if there's a more permanent option that we can work on, but I will personally work on that one, that'll be my project for the rest of the week. And I will see what.
Suzanne, I'm really amazed that you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up because that's also where the county fair has been held for the past 20
But you're not allowed to
years.
park there during the county fair. They close that parking lot off.
And that's the only accessible route?
And that's well, they have, we've talked before about the buses, right? If the buses weren't
I'm
accessible.
familiar with it.
My problem has always been when I've talked to the county on that site, the schools say it's not their problem and the rec center says it's not their problem, right? So I've
Wow.
talked to the building person in charge of the county schools and the building person, and even when they were renovating it, nobody wanted to retrofit and to bring that parking lot up to current code.
Wow.
Right?
So
Because they
I mean, we use it also for the, whatever they call them here, caucuses, when there's
Yeah, it's
only
one of
one
the school
site.
board locations, yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Absolutely, positively amazing.
So
Wow.
yeah, if you have the 2 handicap spots, there's a drainage right behind the 1 handicap spot. So when I'm in my wheelchair, I fall into that grate and I've gotten stuck and had to get rescued.
Wow.
And then you have to go through the parking lot and there's people always blocking the only ramp, right? Because there's this like horseshoe where people sit there to pick people up. School buses have been there, rescue fire trucks. Everybody blocks that accessibility ramp, but it's nowhere near the handicap parking spots.
Wow.
So,
And their explanation is, if you have a disability, you should use our bus to drop you off? Is that what they're saying?
So far, they say that they don't require because the parking lot was built in XYZ year, so they don't have to update it or meet current standards. And I've been,
If they can, that's a reasonable, undue burden.
my kids went to that middle school and the whole entire time, I could never pick my
Wow.
kids up. And they even blocked the 1 handicap spot in front of the school, and that was the kids' children's play area, and they blocked it. So that whenever I had to pick up my kids from that school, I
Wow.
couldn't use the handicap parking spot because that's where the kids were playing, is in the handicap parking spot. I can't tell you the number of
I
times
cannot
I've had
believe,
it.
I am so glad you brought that up, my
That's
God.
amazing.
I mean, that is like the center, it's the center school, it's the one they ask everybody to go to.
I've been trying for years, and now all of a sudden I realize that this election thing, that maybe that aspect would push the county to actually.
so I used to go to TJ Middle School, and let me just
sorry.
tell you, it's
Nightmare.
a bloody nightmare, sorry. I was thinking about cussing, but sorry, but yeah, it's always been a literal nightmare. Even when I was going through PEP, whenever we went to the gym there, it was a physical nightmare for us to get in and out. And the issue is, at some point, they need to start.
Hello?
Whenever I pulled up the issue to them, they always said the same thing. That's either the school or the recreational center's responsibilities.
Given what I just heard, I think it might be beneficial for us as a commission to reach out to joint facilities,
Yeah.
considering that building is a joint facility project. And I think, love our staff, but I think we need to move this to a board level and have the two boards discuss and maybe come to a joint agreement. If cost is an issue, say, why don't, it's a budget, the county board controls it, school board controls it, split the cost. But I think that's a continued discussion.
Right.
We should.
So now, is that something where we ask Courtney to get a statement from them as to why, or invite them to the meeting, or do you want to just write a letter and escalate it to the county board?
Courtney, how's it typically done for
This is Doris.
Yep.
Yes, Doris?
Yeah, just a couple of things. ECNV, but although it was some time ago, did do polling place accessibility surveys. And what I recall, because we were trained by SBC, the state board of elections, and people who knew the ADA, and my understanding, at least in terms of accessibility from parking, is that even if a school or a recreation center technically did not have to be accessible because perhaps they were built earlier than the requirements, or there's some controversy like with schools between 504 and ADA, etc. That it was the responsibility of the elections office to work with wherever the polling place was located, to have an accessible route of travel. And it sounds to me like that's what you're talking about, right? So that I would think that the registrar's office and whoever's running the election in county government would need to ensure an accessible route of travel into the polling place, not necessarily to be able to use the restrooms as I understood the ADA, but to get in and cast the vote accessibly, and return to either the parking place or public transit. Have I got that right?
Right, that is correct. One thing that's important to remember is that there is no age exemption from the ADA. The day the ADA was passed, all buildings, other than historical buildings and churches and private membership clubs, were required to meet those standards. So the only buildings that we cannot force.
So that can mean that you have to rig up spaces. That's one of the things they taught us, because they were teaching people from all over the state where there would be, where it was likely that although many of our polling places, if not all, should be accessible, but down there they weren't. So
right, and so if it is not accessible, we have to put in temporary measures, and so and curbside voting is not an exemption. Curbside voting does not allow us to have it accessible. So I'm really glad you brought this up, because TJ is one of the ones I haven't made it out to. I thought schools was all good. I was like, I'll check them last. Mm-hmm. So I'm very glad to hear that. I'm very sad to hear that. And I will get on the phone with my contact over at schools tomorrow and see what kind of wheels I can start turning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, wow. I'm gonna tell you the number of times I would love to use that building.
Yeah, and like I said, even if they're not willing to budge, if it looks like a different accessible parking spot that's coned off with a temporary ramp serving as a curb cut, that might be all I can do if I can't force them, but at least that's better than how it is currently. So I will get working on that.
Okay. I'm pretty much sure you do, because you're on the ADA. Yeah, I have done accessibility polling in DC, not Arlington, and a chronic problem was that the booth, the accessible booth, was set up in a way where it wasn't a private ballot. It can be seen by people walking in or by people.
Like that, how it's set up right now.
Yeah, so is that something, you said you do the training? Is that
Yes.
something you cover?
Yes,
Because-
that's something I stress in training, that I try to make sure everyone understands. We're also implementing a new way we're training workers, where basically if they're a brand new worker, they have to come in and do like a lab-based environment in the office, and they have to show me that they know how to set up the equipment, they know how to turn everything on, and they know how to check the voter in on the poll book. So that's something that I'll make sure that we cover, is how to set up the accessible voting booth to be private and independent. And all workers have to complete that training before the November presidential election next year. So right now it's just new people, but I'm making everyone, even people who are working for 30 years, they have to come in and show me that they know how to do all that.
And just a point of clarification, in the few times that I have gone in, again, because I love curbside voting,
I love that you love it. That makes me happy.
when the few times I have gone in, I have had people help me put the document in the scanner because it's hard for me to position to do it.
Yeah.
And I've never had to fill out some form that.
So if they're assisting you put it in the scanner, that's okay. It's only if they're helping you mark your ballot. So if they were helping you on the BMM, actually make your marks and make your decisions, then that's when they can't tell you how to vote. But if they're seeing how you're voting as you're voting, once your ballot's already been printed, your selections have been made, right?
Okay,
so
yeah.
there's nothing that can be done at that point.
Good.
So they only have to fill that out if they're assisting you in marking your ballot.
Good, because I think it's a nice, at least in our polling area, he kind of hovers,
Yeah.
kind of watches.
I have a lot of hovers. Yeah, a lot of hovers.
I like that.
Yeah.
Really helps.
Yeah.
All right.
I think he had a question first.
Yeah, no, sorry, I wanted to
You're good.
circle back to
You know
what
me, though.
Brian was,
Yeah.
Brian was talking about earlier and getting in touch with the board on the Thomas Jefferson Middle School issue. Courtney, I was wondering if you had any feedback on how we would expedite that process.
So it'd probably be as what was done before, write a letter, and I can pass it to our board liaison, who would pass it on to Matt. And then there's also the option of meeting as well. I think before we tried to coordinate a meeting. So either one, or both, if you
Yeah.
choose to.
I will say with my new job, it gives me expanded flexibility, so I can
Okay.
now do daytime meetings.
Okay,
So,
sounds good.
I'll,
So just let me know.
yeah, we'll probably move with a letter first and then a meeting second, and then, of course, Dave, we would love to hear your reports, filtered through Courtney to us, just so we're updated on that. and-
Hear about
Yeah,
how
I
they
appreciate
refuse
that.
to
And I
set up
think-
the equipment
Mhm.
for accessible people,
Mhm.
that every time I go there, I have to wait 45 minutes for them to move equipment so that I and my wheelchair can use the equipment. Because they refuse to leave them or put them in ways that a wheelchair user could just go into the facility and use it.
Well,
They refuse.
that's a whole nother bottle of wax, but I want to make sure you can get out when you want to. Does anyone have additional questions?
I had a question that's not necessarily related explicitly to the business of the caucus, but it might kind of be, like
Okay.
tangentially. I was kind of curious, I noticed a lot of the presentation materials were really focused on like that potential overvoting or like kind of this issue where people might kind of like mitigate the efficacy of the ballot, right? Is that like, I noticed the presentation is kind of heavy on that. Is that something that you guys accounted for, that when you were getting feedback from folks, you received, that this was like the specific issue they were having in terms of their ability to access it? Like,
Yeah, this
Is
is
that
a
the
great
top part?
question. This is something that we heard from our friends in other jurisdictions that do ranked choice voting, that it's very common that people overvote.
I see.
We have a lot of non-English native speakers here, and overvoting is already a common issue among non-native English speaking people in our community, because we're not required to present information in any language other than English under the federal requirements because of our population percentage. The county board usually gives us translations when it comes to like our ballot measures and things like that. So we have found that that's a big population that tends to overvote. We also have, when we did this, where we had 2 totally open seats, it was back in 2015, that was when Katie and Christian were both elected. So they're both choosing to not run again. So we had 20% of people that cast their ballots only voted for one person when they could have voted for two. So we see that lack of reading and understanding the instructions happening on both ends, at the under and over votes. What's something to be aware of is the undervotes, if you only ranked one, if you only ranked 1 and 2, the ballot's not going to get rejected because that ballot does get counted, right? Whereas if you do the overvote where you mark every person first, it does get rejected. So those things are things that we want to make sure the community is aware of, and it's in the instructions, but we find people don't always read the instructions, right? They just jump right into it. So that's something that we've heard from our neighbors as well as we've seen previously.
Will we still have winners if the undervote, overvote percentages stay the
So there
same?
will be winners.
Yes.
We will have winners. We will not have winners on election night. We cannot run the second round of tabulation until we have all of the ballots. So that's all of our provisional ballots and all of our absentee ballots, which we accept until Friday after the election at noon. So we will likely not have winners in the county board race until the week after the election. And they are aware of that. So that'll look a little different too. Everything else will be the same.
I do have one question.
And Doris is next.
Oh, sorry. I got a page. And of course, if this is something that you have like written documentation, you know, I can accept an email of that. But for canvassing of the votes, particularly for ranked choice, has new guidance been issued from the
This is a great question.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, this is the first time this type of election's ever been done in the United States of America. Well, in the world. Even Australia hasn't done this type of election yet. They've been doing ranked choice voting for 30 years. So, where's two winners? So, the state wants us to draft standards on what's called a risk limiting audit, which is one of the types of audits you can do in a post-election. That type of audit has never been done on this election. And so typically the way a post-election audit works is we get a list from the state saying, pull ballot number 75 from box 3, pull ballot number 103 from box 5, and you do these math things and it all makes sense. So that doesn't work with ranked choice voting because we're looking at eliminations and when ballots get inactive and things like that. So we're kind of building the runway as we're landing the plane. When it comes to the audit, we're working with the experts in the country, the 4 leading experts on audits, to build that runway. The state has given us guidance, but we're working more in partnership when it comes to what post-election will look like. Everything leading up to Election Day, the ballot standards, that's all been in code since 2020 when that law was passed by the General Assembly. So all of that is in either the state administrative code or the election code. So that piece has been there in terms of the math for what percentage of who wins, how people are eliminated, all that good stuff.
Oh, well, thank you.
All right, Doris?
Yeah, I just want to ask a couple of questions to get things straight in my mind. So
Okay.
during the primary, you're going to have ranked voting, ranked voting. And are you going to have it for any reason?
Sorry, you cut out. Are we going to have it for any what?
What triggers the ranked voting?
So that was the county board's decision. So the state code says that county boards and city councils in the Commonwealth can decide to implement that form of voting for those races. So the county board decided to implement it for the June primary for only the county board race.
So it's only going to be for the primary, not in the general election?
Unless they decide to continue it, yes.
Oh.
As of right now, they've only approved it for June.
Okay, and so I also wanted to ask, in Arlington, are 100% of precincts having an audible ballot as an alternative?
Yes, they're all federally required to.
100%, okay.
Yes, that is a federal.
Okay, and so is the alternative to the audible ballot, is that with a marking device or is that with a computer?
The audible ballot is a marking device, so it's called the ballot marker, and that is the marking device. We have a tactile keypad, as well as the headphones that allow it to be audible, so it's all one machine.
Yeah, so where this is leading is, if I come to an Arlington precinct and I say, I'm blind, but I've never used the audible ballot and I need assistance.
Mhm.
What do I need somebody to read me the ballot, and I didn't necessarily bring somebody with me.
Mhm.
So I know that you can ask for assistance, right?
Right.
But my question to you is, particularly with this ranked voting procedure, this is why I'm asking this question. Where do you go to sit to provide the assistance? I mean, do you guys have rules on that to
This is a great
ensure
question.
privacy of the vote?
Right, so that kind of leads to what we're talking about setting up the ballot marker in a way that provides privacy to the voter. So it's not a separate machine or anything like that. It's still the ballot marking machine, which has the headphones that will read the ballot to you and allow you to mark the ballot as it's being read to you. You can also have a human read a paper ballot to you, and they can mark it with a pen if that's what you like. You're welcome to bring in assistance. You're welcome to ask an election officer for assistance. The only people that can offer you assistance are if there are any observers. So if there's any political party observers in the precinct on election day, they're not allowed to interact with voters at all. So they cannot provide you assistance. They can't leave the room and come back in as your assistant. So really the poll workers are kind of your best bet there if you need assistance, but it is still the same machine. It's not a separate machine to listen to the ballot.
I'm not sure that I heard all that correctly. So do you take the person to some place that's not right out in the open?
It's all in the same room, but the table where the machine is should be positioned to where they have privacy. So where their back is to a wall, or they have a privacy screen up, that way someone can't see how you're marking your ballot.
Yeah, because
it's all in the same room.
Actually, I've only had to have it done once, maybe twice, and I'm not. It wasn't even at an Arlington polling place. That's why I was asking you about the procedure. But although it was a separate part of the room, I felt like I was right there in the open, and everybody was going to hear and know the way I was voting. But with the rank voting, it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable because I'm going to have to ask questions and things like that.
Yeah, I can promise you won't be the only person asking questions.
I was just wondering for an election where they're using ranked voting, it doesn't seem as private and secure and independent as I would feel I would want it. And probably most people are going to use the audible ballot, but that there are people who do different things.
Right. Yeah. This is a great question, and I'll mention this, and I promise I'll stop talking. So when you use it on
some kind of way to, I don't know whether it's what do you call those things? Like you have at your workstation, the dividers.
Yes, so they do have privacy screens. I don't have one here because no one's actually voting. But there are privacy screens that go around them, the cardboard privacy screens. When you're using the ballot marking machine, if you're using the audible ballot, there is headphones, so it's not broadcasting. We know there's going to be a lot of questions on election day, so we're going to try to have posters just like we do for the bond issue questions. We're hoping to get those translated from this county manager's office or the county board, and then we're going to try to work with our voters as they're checking in, say, before I give you a ballot, do you have questions about ranked choice voting? And then they're going to direct them to an information officer that's there just to answer questions about ranked choice voting. So this is someone that's worked in elections for a while, and they can answer any questions they have about the mechanics of ranked choice voting. That way they're not asking questions as they have their ballot in front of them and they're having to talk with other voters around. So that's how we envision that process going.
Will you open your office there, the registrar's office, in advance of the election to allow people to come in and try out the ranked voting on the audible ballot? The reason I'm asking or suggesting this is because when people first started using the audible ballots, they, and especially Arlington did this, they had the opportunity to come in and test it out before the day of the vote.
Yes, definitely. We start voting here in the room at the end of the hallway on May 5th. I'll be here every Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I'm happy to have a machine set up if anyone wants to come through and try it out. I'm there every
But
day.
I'm suggesting advertise it to the blind community. and
Yeah,
anybody else
I
that
can
would be
definitely do that.
interested,
Like I said, I met with NFB Potomac chapter last week. I can definitely push it out to them. I'll push that information out to y'all with my email, and let people know they're welcome to come through. They can vote here in the office during that time, or they can practice. The only thing I'll say is that if they're practicing on a sample ballot, it's not going to be the same names. So it's not going to be, because we can't have them practice on the actual ballot itself, because then it causes issues. So it won't be the same names, but we could definitely open up a piece of equipment like I have here tonight for people to practice on.
Thanks.
Sure.
Out of curiosity, is that office going to become accessible? Because on that whole open house thing, that office wasn't accessible.
What about it?
I can't get in through the doors, like I can't open the doors and get.
The doors will be propped. The doors are always propped during voting.
Okay, but if there was ever a non-voting day, is there ever going to be?
We can work on propping the doors. They've asked us for security purposes to not prop our doors. But I can work with the security team to see, just due to the heightened, how do I say this? The environment that I work in now. They just, for security purposes, they've asked us to try to keep our space closed if we can. But I can work with the security team to see if we can make an exception to that.
Can the security team consider, I don't know the proper term for it, but the push button device? Or
I think it'd be a facilities question. I can definitely talk with facilities about that, and see what our options are, and see if that's something that we can get the county board to fund, because our budget is 0.1% of the county budget, so I don't get lots of sparkles in my job, but the county board does. So I can try to see if that's something that's at least an option for us.
well, I mean, FY24 budget requests started yesterday, so.
Yes, so I will talk with the team and see what we can do about that. But at least during voting, we do prop the door for that same reason. So, thank you for raising that point. I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I'll be here if any of y'all want to try out the equipment. I'll be here through the meeting. So you guys can actually do your actual meeting. And then if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them afterwards.
All right.
Oh, great.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't want this to be recorded, but I work at NDRN.
No way, Michelle. I just know her.
Yeah,
That's so funny.
so cool. I'm so excited about you.
I love it.
All right, so now I think the next thing is, do we have any further public comment? Okay, then I think the next thing is, well, we called to order, done public comment. I thought it was minutes, but I don't see, oh, it is minutes, right? Right, Courtney?
Yes.
Does anyone move to approve the minutes?
Second.
Yeah, the only amendment I have is on one of them, my last name is missing an S. You're fine. I'm trying to find it, I should
I'll look through them.
have.
And I guess we've had to approve both January 17th and February 21st and March 21st. Is that all because of, we didn't have a quorum, Courtney?
Yeah.
Correct.
Sorry.
Last time we didn't.
But we have to, someone has to, here, I'll just go ahead and say, I motion to approve our January, February, and March meetings as presented in our packet. And we'll need another second.
I second the motion.
Second, excellent.
Yeah. Then.
Who's second? Sorry.
I second it, yeah.
All right, great. And I think the next thing here, it says Commissioner Bryant, SPRC for the VHC, behavioral health facilities scheduled.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
okay, is that something you wanted to report about?
Yeah, so I'll provide a brief overview, and I think I sent some slides to Courtney. If not, I'll send you the link to the SPRC website. But the county had a site located on 4 Mile Run. I think it used to be owned by Virginia Hospital Center, and then Arlington purchased it. It's been sitting there for a while the county, mulled over what to do with it. But given the recent mental health and behavioral health crisis that we've been facing, not only as a county, but as a nation, the county manager, Mark Schwartz, and Virginia Hospital Center, or otherwise known as VHC Health now, has signed a letter of intent to establish a behavioral health inpatient center on South 4 Mile Run to be exclusively dedicated to this type of care. It's not guaranteed because actually the state determines if the county actually needs it. So there's a formula that is used and it goes before a separate state commission. So we are going to begin this process as a county to discuss what this facility will look like and how it will operate. And given that the Disability Advisory Commission, folks within our community tend to have comorbidities in behavioral and mental health, I was wondering if I could be the liaison for this.
Does anyone have any issues with Brian being the liaison?
None at all.
Does anyone want to advise Brian on what to bring up? I do.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you saying that this is, maybe people are piling up in their emergency room or something, and this is an alternative to them being in the ER?
Yes, we do have a capacity crisis, and this may be something to bring the Community Services Board on, since this is their specific policy area. But what I've heard from the executive director of the Community Services Board and the VHC health staff is that we're having a capacity issue within the Northern Virginia region due to the state shutting down their state facilities during the pandemic. And they're talking about it on the budget, but of course, all of those are behind closed doors, unlike our beautiful group right here. So we are, from what we are aware of, because of that shutdown by state of those hospital facilities, that created a spike in health facilities like Virginia Hospital Center and Inova, to the point that Arlington County PD officers have to actually be in the room with folks who are on those 72-hour holds, or and they're basically handcuffed to a bed instead of being in a bed specialized for those types of medical care. So it's putting strain on our deputies. They're pulling severe hours. They're not fully trained on providing the care these folks need. So this facility is the new facility that they're talking about will fill a huge gap, not only for the county, but for the region.
And how involved have the community mental health centers been? Because, I mean, if they were given more money, then maybe people wouldn't end up in the emergency room or
Yeah, so the Community Services Board treatment centers are mainly used as a triage emergency first step, and then they're reassigned to a long-term care facility like this new behavioral health. So this facility in particular is an inpatient facility versus an outpatient. And of course, the director of Department of Human Services is also in support of this facility as part of our continuum of care initiative here in Arlington.
I'm at the community mental health centers. Have they given any kind of report to the community service? It was my understanding that the Community Services Board focuses more on individuals with developmental disabilities, and the community mental health centers would focus more on individuals with mental health issues.
So CSB does mental health, IDD, and substance abuse, and I think they have one more serious area. So they're quite extensive, but I think the community mental health center, I might have to double check with CSB on this, but the county currently operates those because this is the one that is used for the Commonwealth Attorneys Diversion Program. So it serves a large portion of our county and distinct populations, and this is needed to help supplement that. I don't want to speak further on the issue because I don't want to misquote or say something in the county or VHD is doing something that they didn't state under documents. So I am going to send Courtney the link to the SPRC website and also attach the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, and then next meeting, or if you want to email your questions to Courtney, she can forward them to me.
You've done a good job.
Yeah.
One last thing, has the decision already been made, or they're collecting comments on it, or?
So we signed a letter of intent, so we're gonna have that, it's gonna go through the SPRC process. I think in the middle of the summer, that's when things are really ramping up. And then we do the SPRC approval on the county board. I think that's slated to be in November. And then we actually have to go to the state to get permission to build this. Because there's a formula that's used to determine the number of facilities that can occur.
As there should be. I mean, we're talking about institutionalizing people
Yes.
rather than increasing the amount of community-based services.
Yes.
So it's a concern.
No, yeah, I understand that that is a concern. But for individuals who have been put, they've gone through the first, and that's a larger conversation that needs to occur with the number of clinical social workers and mental health specialists that can do the primary care. This is more of the building the infrastructure to reduce that stress for individuals who need that long-term care. Now, of course, we do want to avoid permanent institutionalization, and that is going to be a larger discussion in Virginia state law, since most institutionalizations is controlled by courts. But I think, that's, as we've seen in Arlington with the Commonwealth Attorneys model, that has been a productive model in preventing institutionalization. And all I'll say for that.
Brian, Doris.
Yep, go ahead.
Doris, you had a question?
Yeah, so are we talking about the Carlin Springs site?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, one of the things that is good is that there aren't enough community mental health beds. And so consequently, people get sent to the Mental Health Institute over there in Fairfax County and or someplace else in the state. And so I think that's the good thing about it. I honestly don't like the fact that they took away the urgent care that was there for the people living in the Bluemont, Carlin Springs, and South County area, but
Yeah.
nonetheless.
And now that Doris said that, I think there may the outpatient component is going to be housed at the main campus in North Arlington, and they will be moving inpatient, those needing long-term inpatient cares to the Carlin Springs facility.
I see.
So they're still having that, it's just making more room
Well,
for
no,
that.
no, in back of me, the neighborhood is the Arlington neighborhood is Carlin Springs, right?
Yeah. But so yeah, I think this is actually allowing the expansion of the outpatient, but like I said, I'll send a link to Courtney to forward to everyone.
Okay, great. It's good to know that this is going on, that we can submit comments.
Yeah.
So everybody's okay with Bryant being our trustee representative? All right. Let's see. So after that, we have,
Justin, who's speaking about adult changing conditions. Bring up the website.
So, not much of a lay person, I'm a little groggy. So, as individuals with disabilities or multiple types of disabilities, we have a lot of, collecting my thoughts. As people with disabilities, we run into multiple types of needs, ranging from communication devices to wheelchairs, canes, stretchers. But with that, we also have to make our communities accessible for individuals with disabilities. So wheelchair accessible ramps, bumps on the sidewalks to indicate visually impaired people that are coming to the end of a sidewalk, to wheelchair accessible bathroom stalls, etc. The massive issue is with toileting these days for individuals with disabilities is we have that there are people with incontinence that are disabled that live in our community, and that is a massive issue because because the primary way of managing incontinence with individuals with disabilities is through pull-ups, diapers, etc. To manage the need. So adult changing stations are a good way of getting individuals with those needs out into the community. I can speak so for myself because I do have incontinence and I do have to wear those uncomfortable products to manage my incontinence. And I can personally tell you that it's incredibly difficult to get out into the community because normal wheelchair accessible stalls don't work for me. I have to use adult changing stations. And it's not just me, but individuals with disabilities all across all of our community that have this need. And this issue doesn't just affect veterans or doesn't affect individuals with disabilities, but also disabled veterans and the elderly. So the reason why I pulled this up to our commission is to see if by chance we can potentially advocate to the county board to get in place some new laws to help make new facilities or to make make sure that new facilities going forward have height adjustable changing stations. In the Changing Space campaign in Virginia/Washington, D.C., we advocate for height adjustable changing stations. Just because it makes it easier for us to make that transition and make it easier for parents/guardians to do so.
so Justin, I know that you've been active on a number of issues with the board. What have you done so far to try to raise this issue? And is it a county issue or a state issue?
It's a nationwide issue, but currently I'm not a night person, so understand.
Right.
So what I've done recently is reach out to Delegate Patrick Hope, and sorry for saying this, candidate Adele McClure on the matter. We've been working really closely on the matter to get it in place, or to work towards getting a bill instituted into Virginia. But the issue is we don't have enough information on hand. Well, we have a lot of information, but in order to get a bill to stick, we have to have something that is in state. There are states like Oklahoma, and there's the most successful state is Oklahoma. They have now a new law that makes it mandatory for new buildings to have adult changing stations. And this is something that is incredibly impressive, but it took years to do. And my colleagues over in Oklahoma, super incredible, but they took years to do this. That means working with city council members, reaching out to businesses, and et cetera, to get this to happen. So for right now, so for us, my intention with this is to ask if, as a commission, we can advocate to the council about making adults, or putting in place a law for adult changing stations to be instituted into buildings that are built from 2022 going forward, making sure that all modern buildings that are built from 2022 forward has a height adjustable adult changing station to it.
And is this, so you've talked to Patrick Hope, is this something where we would ask for a draft bill to be written? Is that something, or have you already discussed that?
We're far off from that, and the reason why I say that is because currently we still need to work on getting more information on it, within state, to get a bill to stick.
So we'd be requesting a report or some research be done? What specifically would we be requesting?
We would be requesting that the county board looks into putting in place a law that makes it mandatory for buildings that are new to have height adjustable changing stations.
So like a study or something?
Well, I have a question. So you mentioned law. Is the county allowed to include that in our building code or zoning ordinances, or do we have to get permission from Richmond to do that?
That is something that I don't know. And actually, I have to say that changing stations are they're really all over the place.
Yeah.
Put it bluntly, because there's only one successful country in the world that has actually been able to execute adult changing stations effectively, and that's England. And so
Japan. Japan even has colostomy bag sinks. Japan is absolutely, because of the Olympics, they went out of their way, and I can't tell you how wonderful it was to go to a country where people respected the handicap bathrooms, and like able-bodied people weren't in them, but they had colostomy bag sinks, they had the different, it was just absolutely wonderful, so
they
yes.
have adult changing stations?
Yes.
Well, so I guess we can add Japan to the list.
Justin, what research has your organization done on?
We're not an organization, we are a massive campaign.
So you're a collective.
Right.
Okay.
And so what you're in is the Changing Space campaign of Virginia/Washington, DC. We But, so for me, I am the director of that campaign, and I do work with other states on the matter. But so far, every campaign operates independently.
Yeah.
From each other.
Yeah, so I'm asking these questions because the way we navigate does depend on those answers, because if the answer is that this is something we can do at a local level, either through changing our building code, which I think we can only do some parts, or if this is a zoning ordinance that we can begin the process to include that, then that makes our job easier. If that's a no, and it's, it's a Dillon rule thing, and we have to ask Richmond for permission, then that's certainly something we can, I believe, begin conversations with the county's legislative liaison to see, to try to get that on next year's legislative package.
Right, what would be the best way to find out what's required? I mean, should we draft a letter just in general to Matt and say what's required?
Yeah, I think that and to the county manager, and then he can, pull the appropriate offices that oversees that. Or Courtney, do you know which office would specifically handle this issue?
Yeah, I think it would probably be definitely Matt, and then also probably the county manager's office, so that they can, because it's going to be different entities involved in this process.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, well, Justin, would you be willing to draft a letter, which I guess would just have to be sent to Matt or something, specifically saying what you want and asking what the process would be?
I can certainly do that. It's worth doing this because at the end of the day, it makes Arlington more accessible, and
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, this helps Patrick, Hope, and I work towards getting more information on what a law is like, or what an adult changing station law is like in Virginia. So,
Okay, and you don't have to have all the answers or
Right.
make it really complex. Just state what you want and that, research might need to be done, but you need to find out, what the options are, something like that.
all right, and also we hold monthly meetings, as our campaign, we hold monthly meetings to talk about what our progress is like, and also to train each other on the best ways of advocating. So also those are ideal meetings to be going to. I think essentially having them come, it's all on Zoom because it's nationwide.
I do want to make one comment. Given we are in a primary season and election season, if we could keep conversations general about candidates, because I don't want it to be, seems like we're,
Bias.
giving one candidate, especially in the contested races, one candidate an advantage over the other, considering that this, it's an official county or, official county sanctioned board, and we don't want to get into that, open that can of worms. So,
That's a good point.
yeah.
So what we're asking is that you would draft a letter of what your goal is, and that we would send it to our liaison, Matt, to ask his thoughts on how it could be accomplished, something like that?
That works. So I draft it up, and do I email it to you guys?
Well, you email it to Courtney, and then she emails it to everyone, and then we email our comments to her. She emails that to you, because that's just how Virginia works.
That sounds like a process. What about that, Courtney?
Yeah, just email it to me and I'll send it out to the group. And
Okay,
I'll
great.
write the comment and send it to you.
Okay, great. And let's see. So we only have 9 minutes left. let's see,
Chair's report.
chair report. I don't have much to report except that Matt Defer did contact me this afternoon. And he informed me that, that Suzette very effectively raised the issue of the fact that the Bozeman Center has gone through recent renovation, and despite that, they are not up to code within the bathroom or something.
I get stuck in the bathrooms. I can't use the bathrooms. Tonight, I had 2 county employees help me on the first floor bathroom, and only with them opening and holding the door and doing, I can't use the ADA accessible bathroom across because my wheelchair does not fit with the stall door, and I can't get in, the door's too heavy on the outside. So they popped the outside door open. But during their open house event, there was a military display that was going on. I got stuck in the bathrooms and was screaming, and I had to wait. And this whole entire process. And then when they took me to another bathroom, I destroyed the wall of the bathroom because the way the toilet and my wheelchair, it went through the wall, and it's, it wasn't set up.
Well, he told me to tell you, and we did have a discussion about, rights, as far as what the ADA requires versus, disability justice, which is what, that we want Arlington to look like, in addition to just what the ADA would require.
And their buttons don't work.
And
the buttons
he
close on
he basically agreed that he wanted this building especially to be welcoming, and that he believed in justice as well as just disability rights. So that was a nice conversation to have. And he said that right now he will ensure that all the doors are propped. That doesn't seem like it addresses your issue of the stalls, but he did want me to tell you that he took it seriously and he's told everyone to prop the doors. I don't know what the next step could be on that.
Did he inform you if he was gonna follow up with facilities?
So he's been talking to me, and there's a David, and then I was talking to Lynn. And then there's a person was in charge of designing this place and the facilities of this place. And she was blaming me because she was like, you didn't use an ADA accessible bathroom. And I'm like, well, there's a little handicap symbol outside the bathroom. And so you can tell me what you want, but, so they all claim, but they all say it was going to take time, right? And that was also the kind of concept of like, I can't get into this building without an able-bodied person holding the door because the doors close on me when the buttons work. And lots of times the buttons don't even work, right? But the timing closes and I'm not even halfway through the door and the door is just slamming against me, right?
So we need to for me to take a video of that if you want us to show them?
So they're all working on it, right? But it's also signage, right?
Yeah.
And it's also for doors and the fact that this whole entire building is not set up for visually impaired. And that there's no, at any of the county events so far for auditory impaired people. And so this was the open house. And they had tables in this hallway. And with the tables and the people standing behind the tables, my wheelchair could not gain access to the tables, which were community-centered things. And able-bodied people were getting mad at me because the only way I could go down the hallway was all of them had to clear out of the space. And you can see how long the gaps are before I can exit, right? And so there was this whole entire situation and talking to Matt about it's not just the bathrooms, it's that if you intend to use the space and you put tables there, you don't have enough width for a person in a wheelchair, for able-bodied people. It doesn't work. And so was trying to figure out if they ever came to this committee when they were designing, and Lynn said that they did 5-6 years ago. Matt never said that they did.
Matt, I was just wanting to ask so Matt said he wants to come to a meeting in June. I said I would check with Courtney to see if we already had folks scheduled for that. Courtney, do you know whether we could put him on the agenda for June or whether it conflicts with a lot of other presentations?
I'm checking right now.
If we need to move one of them, I'm willing to move it.
And it also seems like
And it's just doors like this, right? Like, there's the county manager's office where the handle stops above my head, right? So I could never get into the county manager's office because.
And I know that Doris
just-
brought up some issues about the building and it not being
The
very,
lighting.
very good for lighting for people who are low vision. So maybe we need to
And the elevators
discuss,
don't tell you which one is open, right? There's
maybe,
no
maybe
auditory
we need to
cue.
discuss at the next May meeting.
A lot of mess up.
Yeah,
That's not
So-
just
so
one thing.
I think
Yeah,
But not
my,
a
sorry,
lot of
that's
money.
really
Just a-
frustrating.
so my proposal is that, we're gonna have him come in June, but maybe we can use the next meeting, like, 20 minutes of the next meeting or half hour of the next meeting to identify the different issues, and then we can draft a letter,
We might,
rather than just give it to one person.
Yeah.
I think we should probably do it in our meeting, so we get everybody's feedback.
can we?
Mark was very welcoming
Yeah.
when at the events and talking to him. Katie Crystal totally did not talk to me. She just blew me off and wanted nothing to do with it.
Well, I guess she's leaving though.
So it was interesting because I was stuck and I was trying to find the ADA bathroom and Katie would not help me. There was other people that finally came in and were able to help me. But it was amazing the number of employees. And I even called Courtney on the phone saying like, I'm stuck and there's nobody here. Are you in this building? Because there's nobody here who can get me to be able to use the bathroom.
Didn't that happen at our last meeting? I thought you had to go to the bathroom and you never
I
came
couldn't.
back.
Yes, because it wasn't, because then during the
Because I
construction.
did mention to Matt that Doris and myself had issues during the construction and that you had to leave a meeting. But that was, his response to that was, well, the construction's done. So I think that, I mean, it would be nice to mention those things, but it's probably not that fruitful. I think it'd be better for us to just do a letter. And you have something to say, Brian.
Yeah, I was wanting to make a comment, given the extensive nature and, the future impacts of this discussion. Maybe, I know getting a meeting together is difficult. You said we can do how many all virtuals?
Two.
Two. Maybe we can use one of the two to do an all virtual work session to discuss this.
I don't want to use an all virtual work session in lieu of an all virtual meeting. But I'd be willing to make the May meeting an all virtual meeting if you think it would allow us to have more members.
Well, I wanted us to have a work session to give us extra time to work on this as a commission.
Okay, but we did that for housing and it, for various reasons. We drafted a great letter, which is still not gone out. So I'm going to take a different tack and say, we're just going to get it done in a meeting. I'm sorry. I mean, it was such a horrible experience before when we had a separate meeting that I am not going to do that anymore. And you can wait till you're the next
Did we have a
chair.
separate meeting for it? I don't remember.
It was before you came.
Oh, okay.
But I would really just like to use our meeting to get all the comments. I think it will take not very long. And then we will ask somebody to make it pretty. But I don't think you need to have a separate meeting. But hopefully you'll be the chair next, Brian, and you can have all the separate meetings you want. All right,
All right.
so that's chair's prerogative. But is that okay, Courtney, that you could put that down as a point of discussion at our next meeting?
Yes,
May?
for May's meeting, and June is clear, so I can begin to work with Graham on scheduling for June, or do you want me to wait until after May's meeting?
Oh, no, you can work with him because Matt just called us today.
Okay.
Okay, the other thing that Matt mentioned, I know we only have 1 minute, was that I think you probably saw the email from Ann Barber talking about some of the concerns she had with the committee, including, well, her existing concerns that she's had around accessibility of housing and cost of accessible housing in Arlington, but also around the composition of the committee, being mainly white, economically advantaged people. And she wanted some more diversity as far as people just in general. And I did not bring a copy of the letter here, but I understand from Matt that he wasn't planning on taking any particular action about that. So if we, as a committee, wanted to continue to raise her issues, that we would have to do it on in an additional letter, because Ann's letter is not prompting any action on that particular point. So
I did not see the letter.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Oh.
None of us got the letter.
So I didn't forward it, I didn't know if she wanted me to forward it, but I can forward it. She didn't, usually they say, hey, please forward to the.
Yeah.
to you. So, I mean, it's up to you.
I think maybe you can forward it to us, because it was my understanding that she sent it to the county board.
No,
So-
so when a commissioner resigns, I have to let the county, board liaison know, Graham. He
Oh,
also takes the roster as well.
okay.
He keeps roster and stuff, so just to keep him in the loop and to update our roster as well.
That's how he got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, do you think we should ask Ann first before distributing it to everyone?
Was it a resignation letter as well?
It was a resignation letter, but she had informed us, I think, at the last meeting when she was here, she mentioned that because of illnesses of her parents and difficulties that she's been having, just the stress of not being able to afford the housing, and also her disappointment that, well, one of the big points that she made was she felt like she wasn't being effective in raising her issues. And so maybe, actually, Courtney, maybe I should email her and ask if I can raise it to others. And I'll say, because I thought that maybe as a committee, we wanted to look at some of the issues she's raised. So I don't know if we'll have time in May with if we're gonna, but maybe for July, we could put it on
I
the
know we said
agenda.
they can have the letter early,
Yeah.
so they can look at it.
Yeah, so maybe let's put it on the agenda for July, and then I'll ask Ann if I can have it, if it's okay if I distribute it to you guys, because she raised some good points.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the only one to decide whether it's a good point or not. That's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, based upon what you told me, I totally agree that the diversity on this commission can be better, and, we do have, I think maybe we can also look at, other commissions have been forming an equity framework specific to their commission, so maybe we can meet with the new chief, what's her title?
Chief of Race and Equity, I think is.
Yeah.
Samia.
Yeah, Samia,
Good.
maybe
Maybe she'd have some ideas.
Yeah, maybe we can, contact Samia and she can help us craft that framework.
Okay, good. Because Matt said, I'm open to whatever you guys might say on the issue, but as far as action taken related to just her letter alone, there's nothing that can be done.
Yeah, I mean, what we can do is, of course, in our individual capacities, I do this anytime I interact with people who express interest, I always mention this. But I think one big part of it, especially when we get into the socioeconomic and leaving us so we can leave home early, the biggest issue is the Virginia law that requires us to be fully in person, the HABO.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yes.
And I know that's why you were mentioning the working group and
Yeah.
so, now, if anybody would like to be very upset about how I just put the kibosh on a working group, feel free to email me and let me know, because I was a little harsh with that.
No, I completely understand. I share your sentiment with the legislator and their decision.
Okay,
I also think we could get it done in this.
You would think what?
thank you.
I do think we could get it done in a session in May.
This letter about our concerns with the Bozeman building. Yeah. Does that make sense, Alexa? Did you hear that part?
You're saying there is going to be a working group
No,
about
there's not going to be a working
with the
group.
bill?
She was seconding
Okay.
what I said, which is that if we give ourselves 15 minutes or so in the May meeting to write down our big concerns and assign it to someone, that we can probably get away with not having to have a working group, right?
Oh, so So you want to set aside time at the next meeting instead of a working group? is
Exactly,
what you said.
exactly.
And we can just like bring bulleted concerns, talk about them, and then someone can write.
Exactly. You got it. I really like that. So I guess it's 9:00. We didn't get to the liaison reports, but if there's anything really super important, I think we should, did anyone have a liaison report that they felt like needed to be mentioned at this meeting?
Yeah, there's nothing really big. The thing with STAR is that now Arlington is saying that they're just looking at the old proposals and they're not changing anything about them. So you guys may want to look back at, the original concerns that I raised
Right.
and think about some of the criticisms that we brought up back then.
Right.
Because I'm disappointed that they pretty much took nothing into account and were like, oh yeah, we never said that we were gonna look at that. So it's,
I'll say one thing on that, Courtney, that email you sent me earlier today, is it possible to forward that response? So apparently they hired a new person in Department of Transportation Services
Oh,
that's going to oversee STAR. He's previously been in charge of the Greater Richmond Regional Transit System, which I'd say is, in terms of bus transit, it's one of the best in the Commonwealth. And he also served 10 years in the Virginia Department of Transit and Rail. And he is now joining county staff. They just hired him in February, so I'm sure he's, digging into all the details.
so what we can do is make sure that he gets Alexa's letter.
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. So would you be willing to give Courtney his email information so that we can?
Oh, so I sent the question to Courtney and she gave me
Oh.
the staff response.
Okay.
I think you said to add it on May's agenda.
Okay, well, I don't have May's agenda, because maybe there are things you want to revise, Alexa, maybe we want to add more points, and we can sign off on it as a commission.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, does that sound good? I should have asked you, what do you think about that approach?
I think that sounds good. I hadn't heard there was a new thing happening, so I'm a little surprised that no one told me, but hopefully I will find out about that soon. So
It's good to have Brian, the insider.
yes, yes.
Anyone else with?
That no one told you what, Alexa?
About this new person that Brian is mentioning, unless this new person is the woman who's the new bureau chief, but I don't think it is.
No,
You
it
mean
was
the new person at transit, you mean?
Yes. Brian is saying that's
Dr. Wang.
relevant to STAR,
Dr.
and I hadn't heard that it was relevant to STAR. So
Okay,
Yeah,
does
you ought
that,
to invite Dr. Wang to the commission.
why is that, Doris? Who's Dr. Wayne?
Dr. Wang
think-
is the head of all of it anyway. I mean, transit-wise. So
yeah, if we could get that person to meet with us, that might be a good idea. I think that makes sense.
Okay, well, if we would, maybe July, is
So
that,
if Matt's coming in July, I probably wouldn't schedule anybody else.
oh, Matt's coming in June,
Oh, June, okay.
so that's why I skipped to July.
So his name is Clinton Edwards. And he, coming from Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, where he had oversight of all of Northern Virginia transit agencies. So I'm sure he's well versed in, the ART system.
Good,
And prior to that, spent 10 years at the Greater Richmond Transit Company in various positions, including operations management and involvement with their paratransit. So he does have paratransit
okay,
experience.
Doris, what we're talking about is this new person that's been appointed,
The
that's
new
gonna be
person's
working.
a she.
No, I'm talking about Clinton Edward, Transit Services Manager.
Yeah, we're not talking about the new bureau chief, Doris. It's somebody else And it's somebody I hadn't heard about yet, which is why y'all haven't heard anything from me.
Okay.
And basically what we
Well,
decided is we're gonna talk about transportation issues more at the July meeting.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention one good thing, which
Great.
is the regional fair housing plan has been in development by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and they're in the process of finalizing it after a comment period. But this will form the what used to be called analysis of impediments that goes with the consolidated plan, and this fair housing plan includes eight different chapters, one on Arlington, and so Arlington staff, and in particular Joel Franklin, were involved in development of this plan with goals and objectives for Arlington, and all the stuff that we were advocating for, such as doing a contract with the state of Virginia for the state rental assistance program for people who are part of the Olmsted settlement group and IDDD group, and also continuing the target of creating 10% of all new CAFs as Type A units, and a whole bunch of stuff that we asked for. They are all in the goals and objectives for Arlington in that regional fair housing plan, and will probably come like June or July in to the county board as an Arlington item. But it's wonderful. They put everything that we went to those input sessions and everything that we said at the DAC, they put it all in there.
Wow. That is
Wow,
terrific.
fantastic.
Yeah, and thank you for reviewing the plan and having the knowledge to be able to report that to us. It's,
Yeah, so everything that Joel Franklin took down, and there were others, Rhoda and one other, all that they did, they listened, and I thanked them at the Housing Commission last Thursday night when they gave a report on this to the Housing Commission, and the Housing Commission also looked at the Americana hotel site down in Crystal City that JBG Smith is building, and this is the second site plan that they put through in Crystal City in the last, just this beginning of this year, that will not have any affordable units on site, and they're only including the 2% from the building code of Type A units. So actually, I did say, it was very disappointing to see another one of these site plans coming from them that wasn't going to have affordable units on site. And in fact, a longtime member of the Housing Commission who works for Wesley Housing, but that has nothing to do with his position on the Housing Commission, actually, now I think of it. But anyway, Paul Brown voted against it because, there were no on-site units. He said it. It was terrible. So anyway, but the good part was the regional fair housing plan.
and George, do you think that that's going to go through? Do we need to pressure them to accept it, or is this something that's pretty much a done deal?
the regional fair housing plan?
Yeah,
I will find out from either Joel or Hillary at the COG, but I understand that it will come, just the Arlington part will come through the Arlington County Board either in June or July. And that would be our opportunity there, because the rest of it is, the regional plan is down at COG. I mean, it's for the whole region, and some of the other jurisdictions are in Maryland, and one, of course, the district is one of them. And so the one that applies here is the segment on Arlington.
great.
And
That's
it may come
really
through,
helpful.
it's going to come through as kind of the needs assessment, and goals and objectives for Arlington for the next couple of years until there's a new consolidated plan.
Okay, thank you for keeping us informed about that and advising us on what we should do. I think we need to adjourn now because it's way past 9.
Do we even have quorum to do that?
I don't think so.
I think I'm allowed to adjourn. You're
Yeah,
not?
yeah.
You're not?
Second.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Right, bye, have a good evening.
Bye. Bye, Alexa.